They used to call it parallel cinema.
Parallel cinema. Like,
Which I didn't know.
when is names given to it? Is there one that you prefer more than the other? There's parallel. There's new wave.
I hated that. At that time, there was also somebody, they used to disparagingly call my films middle of the road films. Okay, I said, if I walk on the middle of the road, I'll be run over, damn it. What are you talking about, middle of the road? I didn't want to be caught in a kind of formulaic situation.
When everybody used to tell me go to FTI, I said Shyam Benegal never went to FTI.
We are sitting next to one of the greatest doyens of Hindi films, of Indian films, Mr. Shyam Benegal. We're actually at his office, and this is the office that Anurag Kashyap walked into first when he came to Bombay looking for a job in 1993. Between the both of you, we have a whole lot of cinema covered and a whole lot of Bombay covered too. But Anurag, I want to start with you. Can you take us through that first time that you came to Mr. Benegal's office?
I'd come to Bombay, and it was my very second day in Bombay. And I found this place to stay in Dadar. And I remember I wore my jeans and it was raining. I was surprised by rains in Bombay. It was June 4th, I think. I remember June 4th.
Month of June?
Month of June. It was raining in Bombay. 93. And the first thing I found was his office address. And I remember I just came from Dadar. I took a train, came down to Bombay and I looked for Everest building. And I came to this office. And I met Mr. Ravi Kemu.
Oh, yes.
Shyamji was not there. Mr.
The
Ravi.
assistant?
Kunal Kemu's dad.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He was here.
Right.
And he was very nice. He sat down, he talked to me and said, why do you want to do this? What have you done? And he realized I just graduated and I only watched movies at Filmfest Festival. And he recommended that I go to FTI. And he said, if you want, I can give you a letter. I said, the FTI exams are over by then. So that's what he recommended. And then he gave me other addresses. He gave me address of Govinji. And there was another office down, Prahlad Kakkar's office was here.
Yeah.
So and he asked me to go look for a job there, and I went then to Prahllad's office, and I've been when I realized I really need to do something before I go asking for a job.
But you've been in this office for a long time,
ever since this building came up.
Which would be roughly which year?
Well, I think it must have been in the 70s, because before this I used to be at Jyoti Studios.
Which is where?
Which is Nana Chowk.
Okay.
This is the oldest sound studio in Bombay. It's the very first sound studio in the country. Alamara was shot there.
Right.
Oh.
So I used to love that. I love that place because it had lived with the ghosts of the past.
Right.
Because just about everybody who was anybody in the Indian film industry, the history of India, the Hindi cinema particularly, every one of them went to Jyoti Studios. Whether Prithviraj Kapoor, Falana, name them, they all had worked there.
Right.
So I had my office, so I was actually living with the ghosts of all these folks. And there was, what a collection of posters. Used to have such an incredible collection of posters.
Hand-painted posters.
Yeah, from 1930s onwards. And I had them all put up on the walls of my office. I just used to love that office. Because, there was this neem tree that almost came into the office. It was just lovely.
The people who came to meet you because they were looking for jobs, and I'm talking about, say, 70s onwards to the 80s, to the 90s. How has that changed in terms of the kind of people who look for jobs in films?
I don't think that's changed very much at all. Because, everybody comes with the stars in their eyes. I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, that will not change because, they come. Most of them, because clearly most of them come from smaller places, smaller towns. And that's not I don't think that's changed very much. Because the kind of larger than life image that people in cinema have, or television now, but not so much television, but really cinema continues to have that kind of thing, larger than life.
In your case, Mr. Benegal, now I'm thinking about, so I'm looking 80s onwards, by early 80s, you were an established filmmaker with the films that you'd already made, which was very hard to define in the scheme of Bombay or Bombay cinema as it always existed?
Yeah, they used to call it parallel cinema.
Parallel cinema. Like, do you,
I didn't know.
when is names given to it? Is there one that you prefer more than the other? There's parallel, there's
I
new wave, there's...
hated- I
you hate all of
hated
them.
that. I hated that term.
Right.
Because it became a kind of caste system. By calling something belonging to parallel cinema and alternate cinema.
Right.
All this kind of
Or
thing.
new wave, would you
Because
be-
this terminology automatically meant that if you were part of the parallel cinema movement, it meant that nobody came to see your films.
Right.
That was a reputation that you developed. Even when the reviews came in the press, even if they were kind of saying that your film was a good one, etc., they would always be this little line there saying this is not for the general public. That's it. Kill your film instantly.
अच्छी है, देखो मत यार.
You were categorized as you're like the Shyam Benegal type.
Right.
You're that kind of an audience. What kind of movies you want to watch? It was kind of like you had to explain yourself. Like if I was, say, for example, I remember if I was a Shyam Benegal type, that means I need another job to sustain myself.
Right.
But I'm curious to know how, like, of course things change in due course of time, but say 70s when, say, Amitabh Bachchan is the big movie star and, Manmohan Desai is the big director, as it were, and as masala as it gets, how did that industry look at someone like you? Like, did you interact with them at all? Like, I know that Karan Johar interacts a lot with Anurag Kashyap, but was there something of the sort happening at that time?
Well, to some extent it did actually, because I had what we're doing just now, I had a similar kind of conversation with Manmohan Desai.
Okay. How did that go?
It went quite well actually.
Right.
Because he was a very good humored, wonderful person, so and it got a 2-page spread.
Sure.
Whatever paper it came, and I don't remember now.
There was a lot of stories because when I was doing a research on a film that got abandoned, which was based on Gurdat for Shivendra Singh Dungarpur, and I used to doing a lot of research, and then when I found out, because that became my argument, when everybody used to tell me go to FTI, I said Shyam Benegal never went to FTI. That was an argument.
But you taught there though. You taught at FTI, right?
He taught that. But I think he never went to film school to learn filmmaking. So that was a big inverted commas. Like, that was an excuse to not go to study filmmaking.
I'm sure there's been interaction in terms of a conversation of this nature. But when you are working in what is being disparagingly called parallel in the same city as there exists that massive mainstream blockbuster masala, which was going like haywire in any case back in the 70s. How do they look at you? Like, how do they look at your work? How were you perceived by people? Like, are you creating something completely of your own, that you are not part of the industry, as it were, you're not part of that mainstream film industry?
No, I don't think there was any such feeling seriously. Because you were not seen as a threat. The main thing is that if you're seen as a threat, of course, you pose some kind of challenge to them. But you were not seen as a threat at all. So you could be, they could be very patronizing.
Mr. Benegal, in your case, there's that one big leap that also happens in the 80s, which is quite similar, and correct me if I'm missing, and we can talk about it a little later on how different or similar is it from what's happening now, is when television enters like every home by the mid 80s, and that changes a lot for you too, as a filmmaker, as a communicator, as an artist.
Of course it did. It made a huge difference. You see, for one thing, people who'd never seen my films
Started
to see those films because they were coming into your home.
Right.
You
I think our first access to his films was on television.
Yeah, from television. As a kind of filmmaker making films for the cinemas, that was a phase when not too many people had seen my films. But they actually started to see my films on television.
Right.
That's where you saw you developed an audience.
Yeah, most people would have seen Ankur, Nishant on TV.
On television.
Right.
No, my first Shyam Benegal movie on screen was actually Suraj Ka Saatwaं Ghoda.
Yeah, but that was
Right.
Suraj Ka Saatwaं Ghoda.
Right. Which is 2000.
1982, 83. Yeah.
Okay.
No, later, much later. 92. 92.
92. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
92.
Old age is getting to me. 92.
92. Because उसके पहले तो it was like your father telling you to watch these films. Television पे आ रही है, बैठो देखो.
Right. Right.
And for our introduction was he made the TV series Bharat Dekho.
Yeah.
I know that we're using terms like parallel and mainstream, etc., but in your case, just as in Anurag's case, you are making commercial films because you had producers who were putting in money, hoping for a return. In most of the cases.
Yes, because except for Suraj Ka Saatwaं Ghoda and one Mammo, for instance,
Yeah.
except for these two films, the rest of my films were made by regular finance.
Right.
Private finance.
I mean, you probably made India's first crowd-funded film. Manthan would be. What would you
that
call
was,
crowd-funded
it
film
was.
now?
It really was the first crowdfunded
Right.
film. But the others, except for as I said, these two films which were NFDC, rest of them were privately financed. So naturally they had to cover the cost. There was no way I could have remained a filmmaker if they didn't cover costs, So that was always a challenge.
How strong was that fight? With your financier?
Well, I don't know. I never thought about it because, at that time there was also somebody, they used to disparagingly call my films middle of the road films. So, somebody came and told me, I said, you're a middle of the road filmmaker. I said, if I walk on the middle of the road, I'll be run over, damn it. What are you talking about, middle of the road? What's that supposed to mean?
But was the pressure strong though in terms of recovery that a film should get?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
it not?
I mean, that pressure's always been there. I mean, when was it not there? Probably it was there then, it's there now. It's always been there. Any filmmaker will feel that pressure.
Right.
The only thing is that, you really have to, I think it's the strategies, you work on different kinds of strategies. You really have to be very, very clever. I personally think, to get your way.
Right.
But, you can't.
Protect your talent.
Yeah,
You have to.
You have to. There's no other way.
You have to do so much.
Yes, truly.
Because you have to say things that people believe in to protect your own vision.
Exactly. It's not easy.
Can you think of an example of where you've been very, very clever and gotten away with it?
Well, I don't know whether I was, but I think I was in when certain kinds of films that I made. Certainly with Blaze in the beginning, of course, there was no problem. I mean, when I made Ankur, for instance, because it was actually a very popular success, and it did extremely well. It won all kinds of awards, all that sort of thing. So that automatically gave me a kind of, my producers trusted me. Then I make a second film which collapses in a heap. Then I make a third film which also collapses in a heap. But then, those were the better films. I mean, according to me.
Right.
Yeah, there were better films because I was also developing a kind of cinematic language of my own, which was happening. And when they were not succeeding at the box office, So these things were constantly happening. But what do you do? I mean, that's when strategies,
Right.
all kinds of things, you try out different kinds of things so that at least you know that the kind of films you want to make, you can continue to make them,
I mean, one strategy and that one could perhaps attribute to you, which has worked for Anurag as well, is you created a parallel star system. So there was a Nasir and there was a Shabana and there was a Smita. These people became identified with a certain kind of cinema. So then that became a star system of its own, didn't it?
It did. It did to the extent that some of them started to resent it, saying they were not getting an in into the mainstream because they were considered to be, film
Shyam Benegal type.
actors, So that too happened. You can't beat the system when in matters like this. Yeah.
Well, what about you, Mr. Bengal? Like in terms of you creating an ecosystem, because you did in Bombay while there was that whole other parallel industry happening. What was the intention behind it? Was it something or was it intentional in the first place?
There was no. I wanted to make films that I wanted to make. I don't think there was any intention beyond that. I mean, I wasn't standing there saying that I want to make a film which is part of parallel cinema or you know.
This is the film you want to make.
It was just I was just wanting to make the film I wanted to make, and in my way. Very simply.
You actually cannot make a film thinking it's not going to make money and nobody will watch it.
Yeah,
you cannot make a film like that.
Right. No, but you see, there was one thing definitely there, because I didn't want to be caught in a kind of formulaic situation. You see, because you know there is a certain formulaic construction of what is considered to be, you know,
the
commercial film.
Right.
You know, the storytelling with the kind of songs interspersed, all that sort of style of making a film, and where you don't really consider characters as much as plot points, you know, all that sort of thing. But all that, you know, over a period of time has actually changed.
Right.
But when I started, it was still there. So you know, and you needed to fight that. You wanted to break that. Because you didn't want to get caught in that kind of storytelling, that kind of narrative process. Because if you did, then there was no question of developing characters, or so many things. You know, and said you had to pay so much attention to the plot and all the plotted points, and everything had to be very neatly put together. All that was there. So, you know, but now, of course, meaning all that over a period of time. Automatically, I don't know how it changed, but it changed nevertheless. Because today nobody thinks, you know, when you write a script, that you're going to write a script doing this kind of thing. You know, you must have so much humor, so much this, so much that.
But that was the case back then.
Yes, it was.
So when distribution was an issue back in the 80s and private funding that's backing you and things like that, did you look at the international market as a possible way to also sort of expand your reach? And
I never did.
Okay.
But it so happened that with my very first film, because it also went to a few international film festivals, and certainly it became very successful, meaning it had excellent audiences at a place like London Film Festival. You know, I found a distributor who would distribute my films in all of Western Europe, and another distributor for Britain. So automatically, film after film after that got distribution. You know, the first 5 films, I had no problems at all. Yes, because I had a distributor in London, and he was a marvelous old man. Because he had these 3 or 4 cinemas, you know, in the city of London itself.
Art house cinemas as well.
Yes, there were art house cinemas, and he used to look forward to getting a film. Until, of course, my distributor started to say he's such a pinch penny, he doesn't pay, you know, all that kind of thing. But I used to feel very bad for him because he was actually giving me so much bow, you know, in the sense that he was he was distributing.
But in that sense, and I know that there have been a lot of Indian films that have had international distribution in the past. They've played at big film festivals over the years, but they've not necessarily been Bombay films. Yeah. Like there are greater chances of a Kerala film making it to a national film festival or Bengal film. Bombay was not the hub for that. Would you agree? Like you saw yourself more in line with say an Adur or say Shaju Karan. Would that be correct to say?
Oh yeah.
While you were here,
to some extent, yes. To some extent, it would be correct to say. Also, in terms of international distribution, you remember the art house distribution. We see Adur's films. Every single one of them had proper art house distribution in places like the
easier
US,
to find
Canada,
Adur's film abroad than in India.
Yeah.
Like today, my morning news was Ritvik Ghatak is coming on Criterion.
Yeah.
It's easier to find his films there than here.
Right. Is that something you've also noticed over the years, Mr. Benegal, in the past 40 years, about how we might be a little more world class than we've been? And I mean, what was considered mainstream is becoming a little more like palatable to anyone who may not just follow formula movies?
Yes, but then you also have today, for instance, you have things like Hotstar, Netflix,
Right.
all of these things that have come, and they have a whole bank of films, and then you'll find that some of your films figure there, in all of that. So it's available to people.
Right. Looking at where we are now, it almost seems like everyone's a filmmaker. Everyone can make a film, and they really are. I mean, the number of videos uploaded on a second-by-second basis across platforms, let alone OTTs, but YouTube, Vimeo, etc., etc. I mean, do we even need to see Bombay anymore as a center of filmmaking? Does it really need to be here anymore?
It's not here anymore. It's
Huh?
everywhere.
No, it's not actually here anymore.
It's not here.
All that's changed. A lot of the Hindi language films are don't even come from Bombay.
Right.
I think most of them come from Delhi or wherever, I mean, so that's how it is.
Bombay city doesn't look like Bombay anymore. Forget the movies.
I prefer to see films now at home.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I have a large screen.
And home also we have made
and
some,
yes, because
some
there's a classic kind of distance that you must keep between the screen and where you see the film.
For it to be immersive enough.
Yes, it's 2.5 times the diagonal of the screen. That's the distance you must be from the screen. Now, that gives you the kind of image size that you would normally get in a cinema hall. When you go to the cinema hall and see. So now I can get that in my own home, and the quality of image is infinitely superior than what I get in a cinema hall. And the sound, I get everything. I mean, the surround sound, the works. So I don't need to go to the cinema hall. So, but I see it there. But I get the same quality. What I actually miss is the audience.
The collective experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when you go to the cinema hall,
Right.
you have people sitting around you,
Right.
watching.
Right.
Here, at most, you'll probably be with your family.
Or by yourself, right?
Yeah, or by yourself. And there's something you lose on account of that. When you are sitting with a bunch of people, you're sitting in a hall with 300, 500, 700 people. The experience was very unexplained. I cannot explain.
Right.
But it's a kind of thing, it's a kind of collective experience of what you're seeing that the only thing that you actually miss, but that's a lot.
I really hope that turning point does not happen, that cinema cease to exist. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.